Now Ben Rich, or as you might know him as Bold and Bankrupt, is one of the most popular travel vloggers on the platform, and I myself was a fan until about a year ago. Online there are certain circles and forums dedicated to what's called the game. The game is essentially the art of picking up women and perfecting your craft and getting them in bed with you as quickly as possible, and then leaving to seek the next as soon as you have. A prolific member of the various forums dedicated to these pickup artists is Volkuta, who has an outstanding amount in common with Bold and Bankrupt. Now being on a pickup forum may not be so bad on its own, but let's talk about Volkuta and how people figured out it is overwhelmingly likely to be Bold and Bankrupt. Volkuta discusses in various forum posts a rape charge he and his mates got acquitted of in Winchester. The strange part is that Volkuta's story matches a real rape case reported in a local newspaper, the Southampton Daily Echo, with Benjamin Rich Swift being named by the judge as being particularly appalling as he grinned and giggled throughout the court proceedings. Now obviously the Benjamin Rich we know and Benjamin Rich Swift could very well be two different people, though it gets even more unlikely when you realise that Benjamin Rich Swift, as it says on their bankruptcy order, also goes by Benjamin Rich. The article also points out that Benjamin Rich Swift and Bold and Bankrupt are the exact same age, though perhaps they're just two strange coincidences, though it does get thicker. The name Volkuta actually comes from a town in Russia. The town was actually featured in a magazine called The Spectator, written by former Soviet Union lover Ben Rich. Again, it could just be a coincidence, though Volkuta and Bold and Bankrupt also have very eerily similar life stories, as they both lived in Brighton, are both bold, and are both around 6'3", which could all still be a coincidence. However, both their timelines in India, including running a guest house for 4 years, line up perfectly.
What was supposed to be a 1-month journey actually turned into 4 years. I fell in love with India completely and ended up opening my own hotel in the country.
Then there's the Russian connection, as both are into the Russian language and culture, and both describe having a Belarusian girlfriend at the exact same time. Volkuta talks about how he gains women in great detail. His most effective method involves becoming friends with local men and older women, like babushkas, and then gaining their admiration and respect by accidentally showing them fake pictures of himself in fancy places, like sitting in a fast car in the south of France. Volkuta then believes that this makes the locals, including the older women, spread the word about the rich foreigner who just came into their not-so-great town. After that, he drops the fake friendships with the men and older women and moves in to start getting closer with the younger women, a tactic Volkuta calls the Schindler technique. Volkuta identifies as an amateur photographer with a real fascination for the former Soviet Republic. Similarly, Bold and Bankrupt shares his passion, as he once served as an unpaid photographer for the now closed Desolation travel website, where a certain photo of Ben Rich, or the person we now know as Bold and Bankrupt, can be found. Bold and Bankrupt's book was published under the pen name Arthur Chichester. Sections of the book are very clearly, as this Amazon review puts it, sanitized versions of the post by the Ligurian, another one of the many aliases used by Volkuta. The Ligurian tells the story of a 16-year-old girl he met called Katya in rural Russia. The Ligurian describes Katya as a slut and admits they got physical. Here's an excerpt read by Bold and Bankrupt from his book, put side by side with a post from the Ligurian.
Katya put her hands on my waist and leaned in to kiss me. A silence filled the closed space between us. Katya, listen, I understand, she said, cutting me off before I could finish, embarrassed that she had misread the signals. She turned and pressed the magnetic key into the slot before disappearing into the darkness of the vestibule where she once collected her letters from Antonio, the clunky steel door slowly closing with a metallic thud behind her. I turned and walked back to the hotel along cracked pavements as the rain began. The Burning Edge, Arthur Chichester, available on Amazon. Buy it!
There is tons more evidence to suggest that Volkuta and the Ligurian are Bold and Bankrupt, like this pickup forum post by user Tractor, who is heavily speculated to be Irish Partisan, which is another travel vlogger. In the post he mentions hanging out with Volkuta, who he refers to as Mr. Bold.
Меня зовут Bold.
And as well as Harold Boulder, a frequent collaborator of Bold and Bankrupt and fellow frequenter of the forum. If you aren't yet convinced, I don't think you ever will be, and that's okay. Whatever you believe, Volkuta, aka the Ligurian, is undoubtedly a very nasty man, as shown by the time he boasted about picking up a young hitchhiker, but then shortly after conversing and finding out that she's completely broke, he coerces her into performing a sex act on him in exchange for the equivalent of $6. I mean, imagine yourself in her shoes, driving alone in the middle of nowhere with a 40-year-old man that, as he describes it, just locked eyes with you through his rearview mirror before asking if you're willing to prostitute yourself. I mean, if you are a fan of his, just stop to think, have you ever seen him vlog at night whilst abroad? And let's not overlook the fact that all these morally questionable incidents occurred after the same individual had already been cleared of a previous sexual assault accusation. Really makes you wonder what kind of person would be acquitted in such a trial, only to then resume their fixation on pursuing young women through any means necessary.